Well, Florida Senator Rick Scott continues to sound the alarm over doing business with Huawei as he introduces a bill which would restrict U.S. sales to the Chinese telecom giant. I now want to bring him in live from Capitol Hill to talk about that issue further. Thanks for coming on the show today, Senator.
Yeah, I mean, let's all remember, it's Communist China. She is the General Secretary of the Communist Party, and Huawei is basically a branch of the Chinese government. And if we implement 5G with them, or anywhere in the world, they're going to steal government information and they're going to have access to individual information. So I want to make sure that U.S. companies are not part of helping Huawei infiltrate government systems all across the world. Fortunately, the United States is doing the right thing, Australia is doing the right thing, but as we saw, the UK is going to at least do partial in their network with Huawei, which could impact our ability to share information. And other countries, especially in Europe, that are allies, look like they're going to also, which is going to cause us to have a major problem in sharing information with them. And you as an individual should be very worried about Huawei having all your personal information.
Now, Senator, last week the Senate did unanimously pass the Secure and Trusted Telecommunications Networks Act, which prevents U.S. purchases of technology from companies deemed a national security threat like Huawei. Explain for us, though, how your legislation complements that bill and takes the fight against Huawei a step further.
Well, one, we shouldn't be selling, we shouldn't be helping Huawei. And if Huawei is implemented in your country, we shouldn't be sharing information with you, because it'll give that Huawei the ability to get that information if it goes to another country. So I think it's a time where all of us have to step back and say, wow, we would love China to be, part of the world community that believes in peace and freedom and sharing and democracy and all that stuff. They're not. I mean, they're not going to do that. If you are a Chinese national, a Chinese company, you're required by law to spy on behalf of the Communist Chinese government. So they're not going to do this, and so let's all live in reality, whether we like what China is doing or not, and we like things to be otherwise. Let's live in reality, because China is not going to be our partner. They're not going to be an ally. They're stealing our jobs. They're not opening up their markets. I mean, they're a human rights violator. Let's acknowledge who they are.
And when we think about why companies do business with companies like Huawei, it's often because it's cheaper. What kind of effect could this type of legislation have on American businesses, and what other companies should businesses in the U.S. be working with instead of someone like Huawei?
Well, first off, let's remember Huawei is basically a branch of the Chinese government, the Communist Chinese government. They've been subsidized by billions of dollars by the Chinese government, and their whole goal is to use Huawei to infiltrate systems all across the world. So, will it cost more money? Absolutely. Is it worth it to make sure we focus on our national security and our individual security? Yes. And so we have to keep doing this. But there's a lot of other companies. There's Nokia, Ericsson, and other companies like that, and they can provide the product just like Huawei can provide the product. And let's focus on what's good for our country. And Huawei is not in our best interest. It's not in the best interest of what the UK is doing. I completely oppose what Prime Minister Boris Johnson did, and what a lot of the European countries are doing, because they're going to impact our ability to share information with them, and they're going to put their government data at risk to the Chinese government, and individual data in those countries at risk. The Chinese government is going to have it.
Another threat the U.S. is currently facing from China is, of course, the coronavirus. That outbreak has now spread to your home state, with Florida declaring a public health emergency after confirming 2 cases. What's the latest you're hearing from state officials, and how are you working with them at the federal level to prevent further spread across the Sunshine State?
First is, we should be very disappointed in the Chinese government, because this has been around China for at least 3 months now, and we still don't have good data. We don't trust the data that's coming out of China. So fortunately, we'll get good, transparent information out of South Korea and Italy and places that actually have a better healthcare system that China has, so we'll know actually what the risk is. We have the cases in Florida now. My job is to make sure the federal government is a partner. So I've talked to the governor, I've talked to mayors in those areas, the sheriffs, the police chiefs, the school superintendents, superintendents, the ports, the airports, to say, what do you need from the federal government? Call me, I'll make sure we do it. We are working on the appropriations bill. We need to all come together quickly to get this done. I've also called on Homeland Security to do increased security at our airports, as we have places where we're having significant transmission, like South Korea, like Italy, and other places around the world. So let's make sure we have increased screening of all the passengers that come in internationally at our airports. And on top of that, the CDC needs to have a 24/7 hotline. I mean, my family's calling me, constituents are calling me, asking questions. We will do everything we can to get that information out. But the group that ought to be very transparent and get it out is the CDC. They ought to be. There shouldn't be any rumor. What we put out the information that we know. What we don't know, put that out information. Also, say we don't know it yet, but we all knew where we are on the vaccine, where we are on testing, where we are as far as the incubation period. What should make it very clear what you should be doing if you think you've been around coronavirus. So let's be. I want the federal government to be a partner. I had this issue when I was governor of Florida, and I had to deal with the Zika crisis.
All right, Florida Senator Rick Scott, they're joining us live from Capitol Hill to talk about the threat of Chinese tech giant Huawei and the spread of the coronavirus. Thanks so much for coming on the show today, Senator.
Want to see more videos like this? Click on the link below and subscribe to One America News on YouTube. And call your cable provider and kindly demand that One America News is added to your lineup. Call and subscribe today.